It seems that artificial intelligence is everywhere. Whether it's choosing what series would fit your current mood, which job candidate is best for your business, or whether or not you're a safe bet for a loan. But AI does not come without challenges. Algorithmic bias, poor representation of women and minorities. Tackling these issues will be key to its long-term success. Stay with us as we dive deeper into the building blocks of AI.
Hello world, you're listening to Her Voice, a podcast from The Choice, the media powered by ESCP Business School and dedicated to decision makers. My name is Lara.
And I'm Emily.
And we're from The Choice's editorial team. Her Voice is guided by one really important mission: to give the mic to women experts whose vision have transcended the competitive world of business, shaking things up for the better. Today, you'll be hearing the voice of Aurélie Jean, a research scientist and entrepreneur in computational sciences, specialized in algorithms and computer modeling. Aurélie works and lives between the USA and France, where she shares her time across consulting, research, and teaching. Considered one of the most influential French women by Forbes magazine in 2019, Aurélie Jean is the author of a book titled De l'autre côté de la machine, which translates to On the Other Side of the Machine.
We also have here with us entrepreneur Amélia Matar, expert in digital marketing and co-founder of Colory, an educational method in the spirit of Montessori that allows young children to learn coding without a screen, using wooden toys, stickers, and tokens. Colory's goal is to make technology an opportunity for all children. And today, they are present in more than 100 schools in France.
So thank you, Aurélie and Amélia, for being with us today. First of all, we would like to ask each of you to tell us about the woman behind the voice. If you had to pick, what is the moment in your career that has defined you?
Well, there are obviously many moments, but if I had to pick one, I would say in 2015, when I was at MIT, I was doing some research on traumatic brain injury. And I remember one day I received an email from a soldier who came back from Afghanistan and who wrote me to explain me, to tell me thank you actually for my research and tell me how much important it was to find out about the mechanisms of traumatic brain injury and how my research is helping people like him who are suffering from traumatic brain injury live better. So this is actually how I realized the impact of my work. And, because you might forget, the impact of your work, especially if you work in an office in front of the computer. And in fact, you have an impact, a broad impact. Yeah.
Wow.
As to me, a couple of years ago, I worked for Greenpeace and was responsible for a big digital campaign to raise funds. And I had been really excited by this campaign. We did a fake trailer of Game of Thrones to raise awareness on global warming issue. And we targeted more than 30 countries and got 3 million views in total. It was a huge success, and even the real Game of Thrones actors shared our campaign on social networks, and to me, it was really once-in-a-lifetime achievement.
That's really cool.
Do you know which Game of Thrones character shared? Do you remember which one shared it?
Was it Jon Snow?
No.
Yeah, Jon Snow. That's what we were all hoping for.
I don't
Of course we do.
Name.
But when we get to the core of what you're both doing today, so either teaching children how to code or developing AI-enabled technologies, the building blocks are the same. And we're talking about algorithms.
Yep.
Right? So when we hear the word algorithm, many of us spontaneously think of computer digital algorithms, but in fact, they've existed long before the first computer. So Aurélie, as our resident algorithm expert, could you explain what exactly is an algorithm?
Thank you for saying that algorithms are not computer algorithm, originally, which is very important to specify because usually people don't know about that. So an algorithm is literally a sequence of operation, a logic to solve a problem or to answer a question. It can be mathematical, it can be non-mathematical. And in fact, as you mentioned, the algorithm is pretty old. The words is from the 9th century. But the concept, of the logic reasoning is from Euclid, so third century before era. Yes, who actually used some reasoning to demonstrate theorems, for instance. So yeah, and obviously today we are mostly using computer algorithm, which are algorithm that we implement, code in a piece of code in a software, for instance, that runs on a computer to run a simulation and to provide us with an answer to a question or a problem.
So, as we mentioned earlier on, algorithms are the building blocks of artificial intelligence. And AI is becoming increasingly present in our daily lives, but it has sometimes shown itself to be problematic, from racial discrimination in face recognition technology, or recently Amazon's recruiting tool that taught itself to favor male candidates over female.
To eliminate women, actually.
Right. I wanted to talk to you about this documentary I recently watched. It's called Code Bias.
I love it.
You've seen it?
Yeah, of course.
In which the computer scientist and founder of the Algorithmic Justice League, Joy Blomwini, explains that AI is based on data, and that data is a reflection of our history. Basically, that our algorithms reflect all the inequalities that have existed and that still exist within our society. And what it all comes down to is bias. To dive deeper into these biases, Aurélie, can you explain why algorithmic biases occur and what are the consequences of these biases on our daily lives?
Sure. So first of all, I recommend the documentary, which is very cool. And Joy, we know each other. She's an amazing woman. She's working so hard, to have an impact, again, on people and the world. So, and on scientists, obviously. So we all have cognitive biases. So we see things, human beings, individuals in general, in a different ways, depending on our gender, social background, languages, culture, religion, sexual orientation, etc., etc. Depending on that, we actually see, we can develop biases, obviously, and we tend to transfer those biases to things we develop. It can be a book, an article, an object, anything that you develop, and including algorithms. So when we develop an algorithm, we can either develop explicitly the rules of the algorithm. So we can obviously don't think, about some kind of people, or we can forget about some scenarios, some situations, etc., etc. Or we can also train the algorithm over a set of data, which is what Joy is mentioning in the documentary mainly. And in that case, we can, collect data on specific scenarios, forgetting about other scenarios, forgetting about people. And Joy explained it very well, actually, in the documentary. And she explained that we collect data based on what we see, what we have around us in the environment, and it's based on statistics. Statistics are not always representative, and even so, when you get a sample that is representative, statistically, even so, what's happened is that you tend to transform a statistical trend into a systematic condition, which is kind of dangerous sometimes. So so the biases occur because we have biases, and and don't get me wrong, we all have biases. I'm not better than anyone else here or in the world, but that being said, I know my weaknesses, so I know how to work around that and to avoid those, and at least to hunt those, while developing my algorithm and running those on situations. So it's something that I wouldn't say we cannot avoid, I wouldn't say that, but I say we can work very hard and in the best way. This is what Joy explained, to track those and to eliminate those as soon as possible. And we have also to be aware of how we use the technologies to make sure that, for instance, facial recognition, it cannot be used for any reason, and this is the example that she gives in the documentary.
We all have biases, and of course, it can be problematic. But in your book, you say that biases are scientists' best enemies.
Yeah.
So what do you mean by that? And can we actually learn from our biases?
Yes, absolutely yes, because I thought that I didn't have any biases until I actually developed a biased algorithm, and I realized that I had one like anyone else. So yes, so they are the best enemies because algorithm biases force us to be better, to improve the way we work, we think, we develop, we conceive, we talk about work. And in fact, so it helps us on a daily basis to do better, and which is very much important when you're a scientist because things are moving fast, very, over time. So they're our best enemies for that. And obviously, again, we all have biases. And the fact that I know them, the fact that I developed a biased algorithm in the past, and I give, 2 examples in the book. And because of that, I know that I can do it. I know that I can transfer those biases into the algorithm and develop discrimination, what we call technology discrimination eventually. So because I'm aware of that, they are my best enemies because they improve my work. Yeah.
What are some solutions to diminish the algorithmic biases? In your book, you mention a sort of algorithm watchers or algorithm police. Can you
it's actually
tell us
used,
about it?
I'm using those now very easily. So you actually track how the algorithm is running over time, what is the output. So you do a bunch of unit testing or large-scale testing on the algorithm to check the output based on the input, based on the same input over time. And if the output changes dramatically, it means something. Sometimes you can also do what we call a mirror copy of the trained algorithm, and you modify a little bit the training data set to see how the algorithm behaves eventually. And you can actually capture some, lack of representativeness in the data set. So there are things as algorithm watchers. There are also many other solutions like working with different people, being challenged by people who are not scientists. I do that a lot. I mean, I work with doctors, with people who are not, in my field, and they challenge me because they know they don't know algorithm better than me, of course, but they know better than me the logic behind the phenomenon that I try to simulate with the algorithm. So they can help me, challenge me, and they see things that I don't see because I'm not in their shoes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Since you work both in the U.S. and France, and you're dealing with algorithms and bias, do you see a difference between how it's being viewed in these 2 countries, or how developers are kind of tackling this issue?
So I would say that in terms of governance, how we develop, test, deploy, and backtest those algorithms, I think we're in the same position, meaning that we're currently working on developing new methods and new governance. There's not really a governance today, a model of governance. So we're working in the US or in Europe. I would say Europe, not France. Europe, we work on that. Now, that being said, in terms of awareness, in the US, I remember when I started to talk about algorithm bias and technology discrimination, it was in 2017, November 2017, I remember. It was at Le Point, a French magazine. I talked about that. And in fact, it was not really common. It was really a new word. What is technology discrimination? What is an algorithm bias? What is an algorithm, actually? In the US, it came out maybe 2 years before that. I mean, Joy actually did an amazing TED Talk, in 2016 on that subject. So I would say in terms of awareness, in the US, they've been working on that much, earlier, and they also develop materials like documentaries, tests, lectures, in university. I mean, I teach at the Sloan at MIT. We talk about that, So I would say that awareness, but then in terms of development, we are, working on that right now.
Ada Lovelace created the first computer program. Liz Meitner contributed to the discovery of nuclear fission. Katherine Johnson confirmed the trajectory analysis that took the first American to travel into space. And yet, their names aren't as famous as Albert Einstein, Thomas Edison, or Bill Gates. Women have always been present in the fields of math and science, but their contributions have been overlooked over the centuries, and sometimes even voluntarily erased from history.
According to a January 2020 report from the Women's Forum, in Europe, less than 1 graduate out of 5 in sciences is a woman. In the world, women represent only 24% of employees in the technology sector, and they make up only 22% of algorithm designers. Why do you think that is?
I would say that, first of all, even though we tend to forget about that, but women were pioneers in computer science, and especially during the Second World War. And I know Amelia is talking a lot to the kids about that. It's a very interesting field financially, let's be honest. And I don't want women not to take advantage of that field and making money. I want them to make money. So I want them to embrace those careers, to be independent, and to also to have an impact. We talked about impact, and this is really a field where you can have an impact on the world and by building the next generation technologies.
Absolutely. It's also a question about the future of work and where there are going to be jobs down the line. And we want women to be prepared and ready to take those positions on.
Yes.
Totally. And so, yeah, Amelia, I know this is something that is kind of in your consciousness and bringing to life Colory. Getting to the start of everything, how could young women be encouraged to pursue a career in STEM?
Thank you so much for this question. This is so important. I think that educating young children, boys and girls, to technology helps them help underrepresented minorities, such as women or children coming from modest social backgrounds, to imagine themselves working in tech. This is what we are doing with Colory.
Absolutely. And when we were talking about this, when we're young, we often want to be the same things. You want to be a doctor, a firefighter. It's these jobs that are the most obvious in society, and you're not exposed. And it's a question of being exposed at a young age, which is what you're doing, that could create those opportunities, right?
Yes,
so
absolutely.
This is a vision you're clearly bringing to life with Colory. Could you actually tell us a little bit more about Colory and the method that you're employing?
Yeah, sure. After many years working in digital area, I co-founded Colory with Perrine Legal to teach code and logic to young children without any screen, following Montessori pedagogy. We have created more than 50 activities with a strong emphasis on pedagogy quality. And today we work with more 100 schools in 30 cities in France. And our goal is to be as inclusive as possible. And this is the reason why we develop our workshops in poor areas, especially.
Wow, I didn't think it was possible to teach someone to code without a screen. Could you explain more how you can teach someone to code without a screen?
Our pedagogy is based on game. The children play without any screen. For instance, they identify which algorithm exists in their daily life. I don't know, for instance, when you brush your teeth, you have to define which instruction you will make one after the other. We try to help them to identify what are the sequences of this algorithm, and they play a little game with these sequences, and they have to find the right algorithm.
So I'm curious, does this stem, the choice of not using screens, does that stem from a concern about exposing children to digital technology too early? I know, for example, that Facebook has received a lot of backlash about their plans to build an Instagram for children.
Yes, the fact is that children are already exposed to digital technology, probably too much and too early. I want to stress out that all digital content are not equivalent at all. For example, you can find really educational, interesting apps which are not the same that watching a dumb cartoon for 2 hours straight. This is completely different. Anyway, I'm convinced that we need to limit their exposure to screen as much as possible, especially for the younger. And at Colory, as our mission is to help kids understanding digital technology and the key components with a screenless approach. And regarding Facebook and Instagram for children, I think they deserve a little bit the backlash because especially if you consider that their products rely on the attention of economy. As parents and as educators, we need to carefully select which products we put in our kids' hands. Do children need social media at this young age? I don't think so.
Maybe not.
No.
I didn't even know that Facebook intended to develop an Instagram for kids. It's the real question is, do you think that developers and scientists over there would provide their kids with a children Instagram, which is the real question you should ask. Yeah.
Absolutely.
What Amelia is doing is very powerful because she actually, with Colory, they provide kids with power power to understand how it works. Instead of just being a user, a simple user, they will become power user of those technologies, which is a big deal because they can then challenge themselves while using those technologies, or watching even TV, or using an application on their parents' iPad or whatever, So I think it's very powerful. It's much more than just exposing kids to coding, algorithm science, computer science in general.
One of the ways to fight bias in artificial intelligence is to ensure representation at the coding and the creation phase of these technologies. Amelia, in your experience, do you find that young girls approach computer science differently?
So much to tell. There is no much difference between children at a very young age, 3 or 4. Their interests are the same. But we see that the difference rapidly increases when they grow up. Several studies show that teachers don't interact the same way with boys and girls. The first thing we need to do is to make them realize they have bias so that they can get rid of it. At the age of 6, young girls already think that they are less intelligent than boys. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Very early, they also consider that certain disciplines like math or computer sciences are not for them. This is terrible. So introducing these disciplines at a young age makes them like it and grow their self-confidence with these disciplines. So with Colori, we plant seeds with which we hope will grow in girls' brain. This is our hope. We also need, I think, a role model like Aurélie to inspire young girls.
That's great. Well, hopefully we'll see the young girls and boys that are in your program in a few years, how they're developing.
Yeah, can you imagine, like in 20 years, we'll see a woman coming to you and say, hey, you know what, I'm becoming a computer scientist. Why? Yeah. And you know what, I work at the NASA. And also, can you imagine, like, it would be like, wow, your achievement is huge. Like,
maybe that will be the new defining moment in your career.
Yes, the impact. Yes.
But I just want to ask Aurélie, because I saw your face when she mentioned girls being treated differently in classes. Did you ever experience being treated differently by your professors or teachers?
Well, a little bit, but not really when I was a kid. And I think it's really when you're a kid that that has an impact, because for later, I mean, you can be aware of that, so you can be critical to it. I don't remember, to be honest, because when you're a kid, you're not really aware of things around you. You're very the degrees of freedom that you have are not as high compared to now. I'm really, I see everything, I hear everything, I'm very aware. So I don't remember when I was a kid, and in my case it's very different because I was raised at home by my grandparents who were very feminist, and I played rugby and I did ballet, so it's very, so I did everything. So I don't know, I mean later maybe, but it's more in general. But I know those what you say, and I know it's true, so I'm very sad, obviously. I see it, for instance, with people around me now who have kids, and I, for instance, I gave to a daughter of a friend of mine for a 4-year-old anniversary, so I gave her it was, I don't remember, it was a fire truck, fire, and the mother looked at me first and she was like, but then she said, oh no, that's cool. And I say, of course it's cool to have a fire truck when you're a 4-year-old girl. And so we still have bias, as Amelia says. We need to fight against those, to make sure that we give the same opportunities to girls and boys. And again, it's awareness.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, the adults around the kids are the ones who have the biases. The parents, the teachers. It's not the kids themselves.
The grandparents.
The grandparents.
It's
different generations.
So, Amelia, if you could fast forward a little bit, let's say we're in 10 years from now, what would you want education in computer science to look like?
If you take a step back, generally speaking, I would love for boys and girls to be educated the same way. We just talked about it. There is still much to do. I would love that boys, for instance, could decide to work in care jobs without any social pressure. And I would love that having women at executive level in companies, tech or not, becomes so normal that no one talks about it anymore. It would be so cool. And my biggest hope is that education in computer science and in other disciplines as well, really takes into account the last breakthrough in neuroscience to make education more exciting for children. Because the more appealing education is, the better children will learn, boys and girls.
Okay, so if we ask Aurélie, it's got a slightly different question for you. We're asking you to look back in time, but still on this idea of, encouraging women and girls in STEM. You were a previous STEM student, and you currently teach in this field, in the field of algorithm science. What is one piece of advice you wish you'd been given when you were getting started?
Being surrounded. Because, I discovered the concept of networking, being supported by others when I came to the US, when I went there in 2009 at Penn State, and my research advisor became a very good friend of mine, George Meyer. He actually told me literally after 2 weeks, he said, "You're an amazing person," because after 2 weeks I already had results to publish, so it was like really wow. So he said, "You're great, you're brilliant, but you know what? You're alone. And you have to learn how to make network. You have to learn how to be supported by others. And I'm going to teach you how to do that." And you know what? It's very important because now maybe in your generation, it's more common. It's, you know about that. But in my generation, maybe yours, Amelia, nobody told us. I'm from middle class. You are from middle class as well. Nobody told us that you have to develop a network. And I thought that because I was raised like that, like I had to work hard and only hard. And if I do so, you know what? I will succeed. Well, it's a little bit more difficult than that. And being supported, having a network is very much important because then you can help each other and you can grow faster. You can do bigger things, have a bigger impact. So I would I would have loved someone to tell me much earlier, you know what, you have to build a network. And I like to say you have to build like a tribe. I like this word. So I have my tribe. Yeah.
And that's true not only for, your career, but you're both women founders.
Of course. Yeah.
I mean, I imagine that's really important.
Very much important to support each other. And we know we call each other for professional perspective and also personal matters, because when you're, it's hard to distinguish and separate professional life and personal life. I think it's all together, especially for us, because we love what we do. So we don't have the feeling of working. So that, that being said, we talk a lot about personal things. I mean, I call you a lot. So, yeah.
My pleasure.
To conclude this episode, could you each share with us one piece of advice on finding your voice?
Find your allies. Okay. Allies among women, among men as well. My best allies were men for me. And without them, I wouldn't be here. Without them, I wouldn't do what I did just because, oh my gosh, they were there for me, to support me, to help me, to advise me, to mentor me, to give me the best advice. I'm not joking. And so having allies around you is very much important, and you can find your voice that way, and to know how to have an impact. So really, in other words, to me, I think, to find your voice, you have to be surrounded. You cannot find your voice by yourself alone. To me, it sounds narrow. Yeah.
I think one important thing is to deeply understand that no matter you are a boy or girl, everything is possible. The future is yours. There is no limit.
Absolutely. And when we have people like you both as role models and making those opportunities possible for young kids, it gives much more hope into what's going to happen in the tech industry and in society as a whole. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We hope that you enjoyed learning more about algorithms, their biases, and how to avoid them with Aurélie Jean and Amélia Matar. Maybe your favorite podcast app's own algorithm brought you here today. And in that case, we're happy you listened till the end of this episode.
And if you think more people should know about her voice, giving us 5 stars or clicking the subscribe button would surely help us reach a wider audience. You get it. It's all about the algorithms.